So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 111, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Michelle Kwon, who's a partner at AirAngels. So AirAngels is an early stage fund, which has backed notable marketplaces like Snackpass, Shef, Papa, and many more. So part of AirAngels, Michelle was at Airbnb, where she helped launch and scale Airbnb Experiences. So she has some really great experience as both a marketplace operator and now investor. So this is a really great chat with Michelle, where we got to learn more about her experience at Airbnb, key learnings that she's taken with her to now investing, more on AirAngels, and also had a really great Q&A. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Michelle, welcome to the group chat. You have some really awesome operator experience at Airbnb with experiences, and now on the investing side at AirAngels. So I'm really excited to have you join us and learn more about it here today. Before we jump into things, though, I think it might be great if we could start off by sharing a little bit more on your background, though, for those that don't know you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, Mike. And it's so great to see so many of you joining. I really appreciate it. And I hope that this is super interactive and casual. But I came out of the womb essentially knowing I wanted to be a lawyer, which I apologize if there are any lawyers on the call. I'm glad I didn't go that route. But I feel really fortunate for the experience that I had in the broader kind of legal world. So my first job out of undergrad, I was working at a hedge fund in New York City on the legal team. And I ended up supporting a portfolio manager that started to do private investments. And this was in 2014, which at the time, the idea of crossover funds wasn't really as well known or popularized. So it was very novel. And he started investing into late stage kind of pre-IPO fintech marketplaces. So we became some of the largest institutional investors in the first big wave of fintech unicorns, mainly on the lending side. So companies like Lending Club, Prosper, Marlette, etc. If any of you are familiar with those types of companies. And it was really eye-opening for me. I had no context around startups, high growth, Silicon Valley. That really wasn't anything that I knew about before. And I was really energized about these companies that seemed to be providing a lot of novel and quick ways that they were providing, value to customers in non-traditional ways. So I was excited to maybe go and work for one of those types of companies. So I was fortunate after my time in New York to join Airbnb in what became the Experiences business unit. And I know that we're going to chat a little bit more about that later, Mike. And following my time at Airbnb, I went to business school. And then I joined a early stage venture capital firm based out of LA, focused on early stage consumer tech companies, also a lot of marketplace and platform type business models there. And today I am both the head of operations and finance at Runway, which is a Series B company based in New York, making video editing in the web, and also a partner on AirAngels, which is an early stage venture capital firm focused on pre-seed and seed opportunities. And we love a good marketplace opportunity. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, that's a really great background. Thanks for sharing with us. So much we can jump into on both the operating and investing side. But I would love to kind of go back to your time at Airbnb Experiences. Could you kind of walk us through what it was like, going from like that initial kind of beta and then launching it and the scale that it was at?
Yeah, I will say that I'm sure a lot of folks have said this about their time, maybe not only at Airbnb, but across other big tech companies. I joined Experiences before it publicly launched, when it was still in stealth, if we want to call it that. And the team was totally separated from the rest of the company, which was really focused on accommodations or homes at that point. And I joined without actually knowing that I was going to be working on Experiences. So I interviewed. It was a super, they were trying to get enough people on that team before they went live globally. And it was a huge event in LA where they launched and announced the launch of Experiences. So I joined a few weeks before that initial launch. And it kind of felt like a startup within a much bigger company. I joined in 2016. And so the company felt like an inevitable success to some point at that period in time. Um, but it didn't feel like a few thousand person company. It felt like a few hundred of it wasn't even a few hundred of us at that point, maybe 50 to 100 people trying to see if this new product was going to work as an extension of the travel platform that Airbnb was trying to build. So in my first week, I was taking on a bit of like an interim product ops type role and figuring out how we can ensure quality when Airbnb was experiencing maybe some quality issues on the accommodation side of things. And so we wanted to launch this new product and make sure that that wasn't an issue. And so I started and within the first week built out kind of a new host onboarding flow. And so that we could make sure that our hosts, whether they were based in LA, whether they were based in Nigeria, whether they were based in Tokyo, would be sharing with us information that they were authorized or licensed to do what they said that they were going to host on our platform. And so they were kind of like, okay, well, we're launching publicly in a week. So if you can figure this out for all hundreds of hosts, that would be great. So that was kind of my foray into experiences. And that was very much the tone with which the rest of my time was in that at Airbnb. One of the largest programs, I guess, or verticals within experiences that I worked on was concerts, is what we were calling it at the time, in unique venues and spaces. So that could be within a laundromat, it could be within a recording studio, it could be at a flower shop. And we wanted to bring that to scale across multiple countries and multiple cities. And so I would say that I think a lot of people within experiences felt this, which was we were sprinting on specific either geos or verticals, and then moving right onto another sprint. And we were trying to get to product market fit within the first year and a half.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And thanks for sharing with us on that. So you did mention like so many different kind of categories and different markets, right? So what were some of the maybe I would say kind of like key learnings from that that you think led to being able to have so many categories and be at such a scale successfully?
I would say that there were a lot of levers that we were trying to figure out what worked. And we realized the same way with accommodations, different people wanted different experiences in different cities. So there may have been cooking experiences that worked really well in Barcelona and Madrid, but that wasn't going to resonate the same in New York City or in Los Angeles or in Cape Town. And so trying to figure out why people were going to those specific geographies and making sure that there were robust enough and varied enough supply so that people would want to experience or would want to try an experience while they were in that specific city was something that I think we didn't realize right away. And so that's why we tried these experiments, or we tried these sprints like concerts, intimate music experiences in a handful of cities, but we didn't roll them out right away. And so trying to A/B test in a way what could work or what wasn't working, and trying to pivot quickly or I wouldn't say cut our losses, but understand maybe that wasn't what the demand was in a specific geo or even within a specific city within a greater geo, I think was really key.
Yeah, certainly. And, just a little bit of context, what sense of scale was Experiences at?
So we started with 350 experiences. Another learning was that we had multi-hour experiences. So you could do a cooking class, a walking tour, etc. Or you could have a longer, maybe 8 to 80-hour experience where you might be staying with a host and you might be eating your meals there with your host and with a few other people that are on your experience with you. And then we realized that the longer excursions were maybe not getting as much interest. And so that was one of the first takeaways. But we launched 350 experiences across 8 cities. And then by year 1.5, we launched across every market that Airbnb was live in. So we went from 350 to over 10,000 experiences in a year, and then many more after that, after the first year. So the scale was pretty rapid.
That's pretty incredible. So that'll probably lead to some questions here from some of the founders during their Q&A. So, kind of transitioning over into, AirAngels. What led to AirAngels?
Yeah. So Dan, Lenny, and I are the three partners on AirAngels. And Lenny, I don't know if some of you are familiar with him. He has an incredible newsletter and now also podcast that I would highly recommend people read or take a listen to. And Dan is the full-time GP on the fund, and then Lenny and I are also doing our respective other roles. This started in February 2020, right before the pandemic. Dan, Lenny, and I had all left Airbnb at that point, but we had noticed that, yes, there were folks who were leaving Airbnb and starting new companies. I think Coinbase is probably the most notable company that was started by an Airbnb alum, and we noticed that there was more and more talent that was leaving the company given how later stage it was becoming. And we were excited to invest in some of our colleagues or former colleagues at that point. And there were also a handful of people that had gone into the venture space as investors or as general partners at other funds. And so what started as an initiative to maybe just put some of our own personal capital into folks that we had worked with before and were excited to back in February of 2020, it turned into over 250 Airbnb alumni co-investing alongside each other by the end of that same year. And Dan, Lenny, and I quickly realized there was an opportunity to kind of help coordinate how that was happening. And in our first year, we did all SPVs, so individual kind of spin-ups for each investment that we were doing. We made 16 investments, did a little over $2.5 million of personal capital across those 16 investments, and investing alongside tier one funds and friends that we had within the ecosystem. And at first it was to support Airbnb alumni, but we started investing very quickly in folks that weren't just Airbnb alumni. And that was really the impetus for starting our fund, which we raised about a year and a half ago now.
That's awesome. So could you maybe give us like an overview of like where you're at as a fund today?
Yes. So we raised a $20 million early stage fund early last year. Like I had mentioned, we're focused on mainly pre-seed and seed opportunities. Again, it doesn't have to be in an Airbnb alumni company, though we do love investing in Airbnb companies as well. And we're geo and sector agnostic, relatively speaking, looking across consumer and enterprise, mainly where there is some sort of like software or internet component. And we've made over 20 investments now out of the fund. And we are excited to continue to invest and to also double down and follow on where we already have made investments. That syndicate that I had mentioned earlier is still alive and well. Investments that we think are really exciting that don't fit the thesis of the fund, maybe a little bit later stage, we will still make out of the syndicate, which is only Airbnb alumni now.
Yeah, I wasn't actually sure if it was just alumni as far as some of your backers and then those you're investing in. So thanks for sharing with us on that.
Yeah.
So maybe when it comes to some of the companies that you've invested in, could you maybe give us like an example of a few, and then what kind of led to those investments?
Yeah. So like I had mentioned, we're excited to invest at the earliest of stages. A few companies that we've invested that are marketplaces include Pachama, Better Leap, Rue, and June Care, just to name a few. Pachama was one of our first investments that we actually made out of the syndicate, and is a marketplace for B2B companies to buy and trade carbon credits. Yeah, which I think is doing really well and is fulfilling a really important mission given what we're experiencing right now. And then we invested in that company at the seed extension. Better Leap is a marketplace for teams, whether you're a small startup or whether you're a technical recruiter at a slightly bigger company. And they are matching you with recruiting firms or specific agencies to help you fill roles that could be more technical, that could be within an area that you're maybe not as well versed in. And we invested in the pre-seed there and also followed on in their seed round, and they've been doing really well, which is exciting. I also mentioned Rue and June Care. Rue is a marketplace for veterinarians and vet technicians, people who work in the broader kind of animal care space and also hospitals. As I'm sure a lot of you know, if you bought a pet or know people who bought a pet during COVID, that the demand for veterinarian care has really accelerated over the last couple of years. And so they're helping veterinarian clinics balance the demand that they're seeing, and making sure that they can fill supply at the right time. We invested in them at the seed, and then we also invested in June Care, which is a childcare marketplace that matches working parents with stay-at-home parents, that can help cover for childcare. And we also invested in June Care at the pre-seed. So those are just a couple of the companies that we've seen, that we've been really excited by.
Now, those are some really great examples. So you got some comments here about a few of them. So to go a little bit deeper on so when you mentioned like pre-seed and kind of seed, what are some of the kind of metrics or kind of benchmarks that you maybe look for when it comes to marketplaces specifically?
So I would say that for the pre-seed, there isn't much that we are looking for with regards. There's very few benchmarks to take a look at, if anything. I would say the biggest thing that we're looking at is the market opportunity. What does the TAM look like today? Where do we think the TAM can go? I'm sure a lot of people have heard the Airbnb founders talk about how when they were first pitching, when they were going through YC, no one really believed that there was demand for what they were trying to build. And obviously, all of those people were proven wrong. And so I think it's trying to become creative and understand that we are not going to be the expert in the realm that the founder or founders are building in, but feeling convinced that there will be a growing need or a growing market. And then also at the founders, do we feel that they have the grit, that they have the kind of, the foundations of understanding what the problem is and what the need is that they're trying to solve better than almost anyone else that we will meet, and that there's a willingness to pay from whatever user group or customer base that they're trying to draw upon. I would say those are the two biggest things that we're looking for. At the seed, I think it's a broader spectrum of traction that you might see for seed companies. Some people don't ever raise a pre-seed, they go straight to the seed. Some people have some early traction or some beta or some data that they can share with you. And so I would say it's a balancing act on how much we're looking for. But I would say for marketplaces specifically, trying to understand what is the constraint. Is it the supply side or is it the demand side? And whatever is the more constrained side, how can we see early proof points that something is going to work, or what would we need to see in order to get to a yes?
And so you did mention the founder too, as far as in the kind of pre-seed a little bit earlier stage. So are there any kind of like maybe like key attributes of founders that kind of stick out, that you've seen from some recent founders or maybe kind of pitches?
Yes. Let's see. In general, I would say founders that we find to be very successful are extremely tenacious. So if we say no once, they'll always follow up. And we feel really convinced that maybe we were in the wrong, maybe we made the wrong decision, and or they make their customers feel that way. And so they have this inherent ability to never be discouraged by a no or whatever their roadblock is. And I think having that really early on and showing that there's this earnestness is extremely important. And then again, going back to what I had originally said, also demonstrating that you are the foremost expert in what you're building. I think that it's hard to want to put your money with someone when it feels that they can't really answer all of your questions, whether it's on a foundational level with regards to what they're building and the problem that they're fixing, or around their customer base and the data that the company already does have, if it's early, if they have some early traction. And so just feeling like you have no doubt that this individual is just going to see it through and take care of all of it. I would say that that's something that we look for, and we have seen successful founders show.
Yeah, that's really great. So, so I'm getting a ton of questions here. So we might just kind of skip through some of the topics so we can get right to the some of the some of the questions from some of the founders that are on here. But right before we jump into the group questions though, so you of course you have some pretty amazing operator experience and now investing experience. So do you have maybe a few tips for early stage founders that might be helpful?
I would say that if you are a CEO or a co-founder or someone who's really early at a company, your number one responsibility in my mind is two things, or your two responsibilities are helping to hire and two, helping to set culture. I would say that from a kind of job description, there will be folks who set product roadmap, who will make sure that there's an office, will do all of the onboarding and HR, and that kind of just comes with your job. But as someone who is leading the charge in building the company, again, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a C-suite, whether you're a founding team, your two responsibilities are to help recruit the right people for your team. And I can't remember where I heard this. I think it was on a podcast a few years ago on the 20 VC, and I can't recall which episode, but they were saying that startups have go through the rules of 0 and 3. So when the company is 3 people, it's very different than when it's 10 people versus 30 people versus 100 people. So there's like inflection points when there are 3s and 0s, which I thought was really insightful and I would agree with. And so making sure that you're hiring for people where it makes sense where you are right now as a company. And also when you go from 3 to 10 and 10 to 30, the culture, it's really hard to keep the same culture. But being intentional and making sure that you are hiring the right people that exhibit that, I think is so important. So those would be the two tips.
No, those are really helpful tips. So I actually had it on my note to ask about culture and the team, because we couldn't talk about Airbnb and not talk about that. So we'll have to come back to that after a few of these questions.
Yeah.
But cool. Let's see. Hey, Brandon, do you want to come on?
Sure. I apologize for calling from my car. We're all getting ready for the hurricane down here in South Florida. So I'm around trying to get supplies, but I couldn't miss.
Stay safe.
Yeah, I couldn't miss this. Well, I'm building Low My Soul. We like to say that we're building the Airbnb for sneakers, but on the blockchain. So you mentioned early on that one of the things that you found with experiences was that longer experiences didn't do as well as shorter experiences. Is there any other insight you can talk about with early on trying to build that business, maybe data points you looked at, and which side of the market was harder? Was it the supply side or the demand side? Which metrics you looked at and what you did to really boost up that harder side of the marketplace?
Sure. I may ask you to repeat some of those questions, but I'm going to try to answer as much as I can remember. I think that with experiences, as maybe there were similarities to this on the accommodation side, maybe there wasn't, but the price point and the commitment of your time was significantly more with a longer experience. With the shorter experience, you were almost going to make your whole trip around that longer excursion, which for some people, that sounds great. That means you don't have to do any more planning. Everything is taken care of for you. But for other folks, I would even include myself in this group, you're not really sure what you're going to get. So if you only have 3 days that you're taking off and you're leaving it up to chance for a first time experience that you will be spending 3 days with this person that you're meeting in a foreign country, maybe that isn't something that you feel super comfortable doing. Versus if you do a shorter experience that's only 3 hours, you can still plan your trip the way that you wanted it to. It could serendipitously surprise you and be an amazing time, and you can meet people from that experience, but your entire trip does not revolve around this one thing going really well versus not really well. And I think that you can extrapolate that to other types of products or services. a lot of times people want a free trial or a freemium type of a business model because they don't want to commit to spending however much it may be to go onto a paid tier or a higher paid tier. And so letting people validate that this is something that they enjoy, that this is something that they would pay for, I think is a nice way of then ushering them into a higher paying either service or product. So that was, I think, maybe the learning that we did have from kind of those longer excursions. And so what we started to do was offer shorter experiences with the same host that would also offer. So let's say if there's a 3-day excursion in Alaska, you could also do a 1-day excursion with them. Exactly. And then next time, if you wanted to go back to Alaska, you could book the 3-day trip if you had a great time your first time, or if you really enjoyed it, and you could then recommend that 3-day excursion to someone that you knew was going to be going another time. That was one learning that we had. Another learning or another metric that we were thinking about that we were measuring was rebooking. So how many times was someone doing an experience, whether it was in the same city or in another city? So did you like what you were doing in Barcelona? Would you do an experience in Paris if you were on a Euro trip, for example? So that was one. Another was kind of invite. So if you were going on a trip or if you were going on an experience, how many other people were you booking for? Was it just for yourself? Or were you booking for a group? That was also something that we were looking at, and we tended to see maximum groups of about 4, but usually it was 1 or 2. Which is also then you think about messaging in a very different way if you're messaging to an individual versus a family or to a group. I don't know that I remember your other questions, Brandon.
No, that was very informative. I appreciate it, and we'll try to apply it to our business. So what I'm gathering is that the demand side was really kind of the harder side initially, and convincing users that longer excursions could be extrapolated from shorter ones that they enjoyed.
I would say that the demand side, yes, we tested earlier on, but we had to get our supply side all buttoned up and ready on the platform before we went live, which is, I wouldn't say it's like taking inventory risk, but that was something that there was an order of operations that needed to happen. Absolutely.
Those are really great questions. Thanks, Brandon. Let's see. Hey, Connie, do you want to come on?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing so much, Michelle. I'd love to dig more into what you were saying about you guys look primarily at market opportunity and TAM for pre-seed, and would love if you can give an example or two of marketplaces and how they pitch that, because I feel like it's always like an overblown number, and then you're like, and I'm going to start within this, and you're saying capture it all or 10% of it, but like what pitches have been effective in convincing you that they can actually capture that market?
So I would say that on the pre-seed side of things, there's a balance between drawing upon your own expertise or what you already do know, and also trying to be objective as you receive information around an area that you don't know. So I will talk about Rue as an example, or expand upon Rue. I do not have a pet. I've never had a pet, so I've never had to go to the vet. So I am automatically going to be someone who knows less about that space than someone who either has a pet, works in that space, has read up on it, whatever it may be. So then for us to understand what the market opportunity is, and we quickly realized that while the TAM was big enough as an understanding, I wish that I could tell you the number right now, but the more exciting part of the pitch was actually how much more value an individual provider was bringing to a clinic. So each provider, whether it's a veterinarian tech, they are bringing in a minimum of $1 million to that clinic a year and up to 5 million. It depends on where they're based. It depends on how many hours they work. And so that shows that there is this expansion opportunity. So if a vet clinic has 2 providers, the amount that they're able to service is going to be more limited, obviously, than if there are 3 or 4 providers at that specific location. And by adding 1 or 2 additional providers, you can bring in anywhere from 2 to 10 million additional dollars a year. And so thinking about that was really exciting for us, and quantifying it in some numbers made it very easy for us to do, or for us to look at this at the pitch deck, in which they were saying, well, by us opening up our platform, by us making this accessible to people across different geographies, we're expanding the serviceable market by this amount of millions of dollars if we just have 10 people, 100 people, 500 people. And so I would say that's a really easy way to make people familiar with a market that maybe they may not already be familiar with, or even if you are, think maybe you're not on the financial side of things and don't understand how you can pitch it, or how you can understand it in a way that is digestible from like a market opportunity size.
That was great. Thanks, Michelle.
So let's see. Hey, Andrew, do you want to come on?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm a former AirAngel as well. I'm a former alumni of Airbnb as well, and now turned marketplace founder. Yeah. And so what I was really interested in is the period of growth that you described for when the company went from 350 experiences to 10,000. Seemed like that happened pretty rapidly. I would love to learn some of the challenges that you faced during that time, and like what it was like, and when you guys were what were the pressing issues that you guys had to figure out to make that scale happen?
Yes. What I'm assuming you were working on homes?
Yeah. So I was a part of the West by Place Work team.
Okay, cool. So because I didn't work on any part of the business other than experiences, I would say that my time at Airbnb is skewed in that direction. But I, again, came from a very buttoned up hedge fund where everyone worked across all hours, locations, very high level of performance that we were measured upon. And then I went to Airbnb, and I wouldn't say that it's different from how high performing and smart and committed people are. But the first week, people said, we're building the plane as we fly. And that, to me, hearing this after never being in tech or in a startup capacity, not that, again, Airbnb was a startup at the time, was pretty alarming. And I would say that was reflective of what we were doing during my time at Airbnb, which was we were building it as we flew. And already flying, some people don't enjoy. And so I can't imagine it being super enjoyable trying to be in the air in a partially built aerial vehicle. And so I would say that you learn a lot, and you learn, okay, if things are not going so well, how to try to rectify it as quickly as possible. So that's kind of how I felt my experience was the entire time. It was a bit hair on fire for multiple years with no stop, but that's kind of, I guess, what it feels like to be in a high growth situation. And I think that because experiences was such a new concept, or it was a new product that we were introducing vis-a-vis homes, which is so, it almost didn't even need a growth engine. It felt like homes was just growing so rapidly, but it already had a pretty established base of users. So it felt like we were constantly trying to get to the volume of homes, even though we had just launched experiences, which is a little bit difficult, I would say, to do, or make sure that the product experience for users felt as mature and as thought through as homes was. Again, even though homes had been around for many years prior.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And you also mentioned that you guys were really focused on trying to make sure the product had product market fit. And so I guess for me, I'm thinking of there's that mix of we're trying to make sure that the product just works and people want it, but were you guys also kind of figuring out hey, this might be really big and we might need to plan for scale ahead of time? Or was that something you worried about after thinking about PMF issues?
I would say that we worried about that after. We were focused on building a repository of experiences that were high quality. So we were focused on a lot of quality metrics early on, even in just the beta. And as we continue to scale, making sure that there was a very well-defined internal set of metrics in which these types of experiences were allowed to stay on the platform versus not. But yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on. Let's see. We have one more, and then we'll just jump over to you after this, Adam. So sorry about that. Hey, Jenny, do you want to jump on?
Yeah. Thanks so much for making the space, and thank you, Michelle. I was curious, how do you guys think about TAM and SOM and SAM when it's an entirely new market that doesn't exist? It's like a different category altogether. Or is that something that isn't attractive to AirAngels because you do look very seriously at TAM?
Well, I would say that I think a lot of firms look at TAM. I would say that we've made investments in emerging market opportunities, well, actually, I wouldn't say crypto or Web3 is as emerging. It's already kind of here, and there are pretty solid ways in which you can measure that. I would say that if it is, I'm actually not even really sure what is a whole new market where there's no way to measure what the market need is. But I think that if it doesn't, it could be hard for us to get there on those types of opportunities if it just feels completely out of left or right field. I would say because we're such a small fund, we're only 20 million, we're not looking to invest in opportunities that could be really capital intensive. For example, you could think about space travel, which you could say is like an emerging area, or again, is maybe already here, but there's not really a way to quantify what that TAM is. But along with investing into that space, you know that there's going to be a really long period of time before there's any sort of liquidity event for the capital that you've invested. It's hard to really understand how much investment you would have to take for that company, whether market risk timing alone would kind of maybe fail to see a success there. Then those are things that we think about in lieu of, can we get there on the kind of market sizing?
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on, Jenny. Hey, Adam, I know you've had your hand raised for a while, so thanks for being patient.
No problem at all. Thanks, Michelle. This has been awesome. So one of my advisors is actually also ex-Airbnb. Love you guys.
Nice.
Awesome group of people. Funny enough, last week he reached out to Daniel, which I think is one of your partners.
Yeah.
And just was kind of exploring how you guys think about the travel category. And Daniel's response was, you guys don't like it, and especially the experience. And so I'm curious, because I didn't get the chance to follow up with Daniel and ask him to expand, if you do have any way of expanding on why AirAngels is tepid, to say the least, about the travel category.
This is a hot question. I'm glad that you asked.
Yeah.
I would say that I think this goes back to something either a question that I had answered or mentioned earlier. It's hard when you want to invest in a category that you know so much about, because you bring a lot of bias to that category. So I would say a lot of folks who make, and I don't think this is the right parallel, but I'm going to make it, people who were speaking to the Airbnb co-founders when they were first starting have all of these biases around sleeping in other people's homes versus hotels, and whether accommodations like this could scale globally. And there was so much pushback that they got early on because people just thought there's no way that this could be disrupted. So there's one aspect to us being maybe somewhat averse to travel, because there is that. A second is, I think, understanding, based off of all of our experiences at Airbnb, how competitive this space is. Because travel in and of itself is not defensible. There's a lot of price sensitivity to what people do. There's a lot of, what would I say, X factors that you can't capture in a product experience that change people's decisions around why they choose to go X airline or Y hotel or Z city. So those things, it's very hard to quantify. And then second, which is one of the things that we do look for in opportunities, is helping to scale. We like investing in companies that there is zero marginal cost at scale. And so you see that a lot with software or with internet-based products. And so it depends on the type of travel company or service that you're providing. But a lot of times, like experiences, it's not zero marginal cost. There is a cost associated with every single transaction or every single interaction that a user or customer has, versus and so that's one of the reasons why we are a little bit more sensitive to the travel category, or are more critical in the way that we evaluate travel specific opportunities.
Great answer. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, that was
No
great.
worries.
Great question answer on that. So cool. We got a few more minutes, but I want to see if we can get through some of these. Hey, Shigan, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to join the Airbnb fan club. I'm building a company called Work Everywhere, B2B SaaS marketplace enabling the future of workplace experiences. Obviously, Airbnb, one of the foremost marketplaces of offline experiences, has really led the space. Wanted to dig into some other insights. I know you talked a lot about high quality experiences, but what you're seeing about the future of experiences. Then also leaning on Adam's question, if there's an AirAngels position about the future of work/workplace experiences, would love to hear some thoughts also.
Yeah. So I would say our view, I will speak for myself. I will not speak for my other partners, but I would say that users, customers, individuals, more and more want something that feels not only genuine, but also unique and customized to them. And it's hard to do that at scale. But I would say, based off of a variety of factors, I think social media and TikTok are large contributing factors to this way that a lot of individuals are thinking. Is you see someone present a highly curated, highly edited snapshot into what they're experiencing, whether it's at a restaurant, whether it's at their workplace, whether it's on a trip, and you want that, but made for you. And you also want there to be delight and serendipity in that period of time or during that experience. And so I would say that that's kind of where I think the future of the consumer experience is going. And I would have said maybe 3 years ago, you also want it to be carbon neutral, but I feel that I think it should be, but a lot of people have decided that's maybe not as important to them. On the future of work, I have two very competing viewpoints. One, because Dan, Lenny, and I all live in different cities. But we've been I feel very thankful that we've been able to have such a high degree of communication and successfully deploy $10 million out of this fund and raise the fund all remotely. And so in that way, I think that you can see a world in which companies can be totally remote or hybrid or whatever that may be. And you can have a successful working environment and a successful work product amongst folks who are remote. Separately, I come to work in my office every day at Runway, and half of our team is based in New York. We're a half hybrid team, half based in New York, half global remote. And I would say that we are probably the most productive when we're all together. And so those are two points of view that don't make sense together, but I hold them at the same time.
Thank you very much. I think we share similar opinions, and I'd love to contact AirAngels when we've further developed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll drop my email in here just so that everyone has it. But feel free to shoot me a note at any point just so that I don't forget.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for posting that. So a few questions in here about how to get in touch with you. So let's see if we can get one last question in. Hey, Namu, do you want to come on? And thanks for waiting patiently, by the way.
No worries. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for sharing, Michelle. My question is, I'm kind of curious about how, when you're at Airbnb, like, I think experience can be very subjective and hard to control the consistent quality, and it's very personal. So I'm kind of curious as to like how you were making sure that like the quality is consistent, especially with other people, and also what are you excited about, like what do you see in the VC space that you are excited about? I think one of the most profound achievements of Airbnb is not only just unlocking the supply, but like changing people's attitude toward like staying somebody else's home. So something about like that culture, like how can you activate aspect of how people are changing their attitude toward something new. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but kind of curious.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to try to answer. I would say that we had, as a company, we had many offices. We had 30 offices when I was there all over the world. And we had people in charge of either specific territories or countries within specific regions. And they were either from those places or had worked in those places. And they were responsible for bringing on supply that was unique to the area that they were managing. And that was the power and the magic of Experiences, was that hosts we did not have, okay, every city had to have a photography tour. Every city had to have, this kind of experience and that kind of experience. It was within a specific market. The manager of that market was responsible for curating a robust set, but that was unique and that was meant to be reflective of that specific area. And they did such an amazing job. And they were constantly in touch with our hosts. And our hosts were, I think Airbnb hosts are the best. I'm obviously biased, but they give so much of themselves to Experiences, to their accommodations, which is why I think it's so magical a lot of the time. But those specific territory managers were also responsible for just making sure that they were checking in, reviewing guest reviews, and making sure that if a specific host was giving an experience 5 times a week, that each time that it was given, it was going to be a great experience for the booking guest. So that's kind of how we were able to control for quality, was literally having boots on the ground and people who are familiar with those specific hosts and what that experience was supposed to be like. And I would say that what I think Brian and the co-founders did an amazing job of is leveraging the power of storytelling at Airbnb, and having this really great kind of catchphrase of belong anywhere that everyone could rally around, not only the people who worked at Airbnb, but also our hosts and our guests. And it really became a defining part of the company culture and identity. And people who were drawn to that would then be drawn to work there, would then be drawn to book on the platform. And so it's a little bit of like attracts like, if that makes sense. And they had, I really believe that they are visionaries, and Brian is such an incredible speaker and was able to weave the was able to weave the Airbnb story in a way that made it approachable but powerful. And I think that has to come from the top. So I would say power of storytelling and culture has to come from the top.
That's a great question and a great way to wrap up the group chat. So I know we're actually over time here, but this is such a great chat, and I know we covered lots of ground and kind of bounce around a little bit. But it's a real treat to have you join us here today. So thank you for taking the time to join us and sharing all your awesome experience and insights with us, and then answering the questions that we had here. So
of course, thank you for the invite, Mike, and appreciate everyone for staying on.
Yeah, and then last but not least, right before we wrap things up, time for kind of a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you and reach out to AirAngels maybe?
Yeah, so I shared my email in the chat. We still all use Gmail, which is crazy, but feel free to shoot me an email if you want to reach out. Follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. On Twitter, it is We Are AirAngels, and on LinkedIn, it's just AirAngels. Would appreciate the follow.
I'll put the links in the description, so you'll get a lot of new founder fans coming your way. Marketplace.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, really appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining in and the great questions today.